What is going on, guys? Lord Valor here, and welcome back to another episode of Lifecast. I didn't even check what episode it is, cause
you should just label it number 69.
Yeah, it's episode insert number here. Editing me, put in the number. Oh wait, it's on the screen.
This right here.
It's been a crazy past couple of months. University's winding down, and yeah, so we're in the midst of moving out right now, and it's a great time. The room's a mess. Ross had to move a couple of my bags just to get in here so we could do this podcast for you. But speaking of who's on this episode, it's Ross. Ross is back. How you doing, Ross?
Not bad. Yourself?
Oh, we're doing, you know?
We are doing.
We be doing.
We be doing your mom.
We ignore comments like that, don't we?
Double team.
Anyway, welcome back to Lifecast, everybody. It's been a hot minute. I haven't done this in a while. I'm out of practice, and this every day today. This is just proving my point. All day today, I've had trouble speaking, so this is gonna be an interesting episode to see how this turns out. Words have been a struggle today. So we'll see what happens here. But we're here to discuss two movies.
Ooh.
The Northman?
The
Northman. I said Northern. The Northman, which took me to a whole new level of understanding of what movies are, and we'll get there.
I understood it quite well.
I understood it too. It was just.
You didn't cope. You needed to.
I needed to cope with it by laying in bed and crying.
I, on the other hand, loved it.
Ross is a huge fan. I'm just like, it was a good movie, but there were some things that were just like very jarring for me. But we'll get into that. And we're here to talk about that, and we're also here to talk about
Doctor
Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. So, two pretty high profile movies right now. So we're here to talk about those two. So which one do you want to start with, Ross? Do you want to start with the Northman, or do you want to start with Marvel?
I don't care. You get to choose.
All right, the Northman, since we saw that one first.
Okay.
Ross, overall first thoughts of the movie.
I really enjoyed that movie. I would give it a 9.5 out of 10 on my scale. But once again, my scale is a little bit different. I'd give it a 9.5 out of 10, but I probably wouldn't watch it anytime soon. If you remember when we reviewed Uncharted, I said it was only a 7.5 movie-wise, but I would easily watch it again. The Northman, 9.5, but I would take maybe a year or two off, just not only because it is a good movie, but it is a very visual movie, shall we say, in terms of...
It was very graphic.
It was very graphic. But those images will stay with you for a long time. But I really enjoyed the movie. I have done some research into the Vikings and stuff like that, because this is what this movie is based on. There were a few references to that movie. If you remember, when Mr. Bad King, we'll call him, I forget his name, moved from Norway to Iceland. And they said something about King Harald Hardrada. He is an actual historical figure who basically united Norway and was a very good king. He's a very good king for the Vikings. So in other words, he won a lot of battles and banged a lot of women.
Everyone in that era.
But he was also a bit of a statesman. Like he could understand like how a state was supposed to be run a lot better than most of his counterparts, and stuff like that, as well as the visual imagery, besides the graphicness of especially how they viewed their religion, which is Norse mythology, and so kind of the intertwining of Odin. And they didn't really use Thor, but throughout the movie you could see ravens, which in Norse mythology are kind of like the messengers / watchers of Odin. So you kind of have this feeling that even though you know that Norse mythology isn't technically correct, you have this feeling that in this universe that the movie creates, he is watching, and everything that goes on is according, or is at least according to Odin's will, which is I thought was great from the movie. I personally appreciated the graphic details, which is the brutality, which I will recommend if you are under 17 or 18. Do not see this movie.
No.
Do not. No, it's rated mature, I think, or restricted.
It's R. It's R. It's for sure R.
It should probably actually be NC-17. It's brutal.
Very, yes. So, it was not the violence for me that, like, really threw me off of this movie. Because going in, I knew it was, like, a Viking-esque kind of movie. So, I was expecting a little more violence, and it was rated R. And, like, you know, you just expect some things going into a movie, and that's, from the mood of the trailers, that's what I got, is a violent, dark-esque kind of story, and that's what we got for the most part. I think what threw me off was the Norse mythology. Something I was totally not expecting. And so when the movie starts with them doing this weird ritual, it was like, okay, he's like being king, but like, what am I missing here? And I think what threw me off was that Norse mythology, because I didn't know what to expect around the corner, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they were introducing people like seers and the blind chick, the sower. I don't know what she specifically is, because it's Norse mythology and Greek mythology have a lot of similarities.
They kind of do. It's
but
there's
that's
a lot. If you actually like look in between the differences between Greek mythology and Norse mythology, there are quite a few differences. Like obviously, there's the whole pantheon of gods, which is very similar, and like what they're gods of, but the lore is
so much different.
So different.
But that's the point, right? Is there's similar concepts like in Harry Potter.
Yeah.
There's definitely like Greek mythology things in there, but it's definitely its own story, right? And you don't associate any of those Greek mythology details to Greek mythology. You associate it to Harry Potter.
Yes.
But yeah, so the main thing was the introduction of like the weird seers and stuff. So like I didn't know what to expect when the next scene came on. I didn't know if we were gonna get something like super out there and weird, or if we were gonna just get a normal fight scene. So I think that's what really threw me about the movie, was that I was not expecting that Norse mythology twist, and that's why I was so like jarred by the movie. Another part of it is that I think I described the movie to someone this way. It's like you go from somebody getting absolutely obliterated with like axes and like grotesque stuff to people dancing around a fire, having an orgy together, and then right back to violence. So there's like this like gruesome like masculine urge to just cut people's heads off. Then there's this masculine urge to go have an orgy with people, and then there's back to the cutting people's heads off. It's like so much of the jarring, just, you know, the jarring part. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know exactly.
It was just so jarring, the transitions between the shots, that it was just like, okay, that's also kind of throwing me off, which I think was a strong suit of the movie. I'm not dissing it. I'm just that was my observation.
Yeah, like in that case, it actually like there's obviously like time in between it, but the way the movie made it is that it would just go from one to the other really quickly. And so I can agree with you there, but it is very realistic for it to go that way, because if you think about, you know, the actual societies at the time, they were very masculine focused. So, you know, and for the Vikings especially, fighting and orgies were kind of their thing.
Right. Like dancing around a fire, singing weirdly, and like having orgies. That's like a praise to their gods or something. Like there's whole like lore behind that, and I understand that. So it's not like I was thinking, oh, they're having this orgy session, I have an orgy session. Like I understood that there was like reasons behind the religion, the Norse religion, on why that was. But yeah, so basically the story is about do you remember the main character's name?
I don't remember his name.
It's slipping me, but
it's an A name.
Yeah, essentially his uncle took over he was the heir to the throne, but his uncle took over he killed his father and like took over. And then, like, the story, that's the first intro scene in this story.
Don't forget that he swears revenge.
Right, and then, so he swears revenge as a kid. He rows away from the island and, like, goes and lives somewhere else. And then 30 years later, he is called back by Odin, I guess.
He's kind of called back through Odin by a soothsayer when he was in, which was in the Kievan Rus, which in this day is modern day Russia. I remember this part specifically. So this is about like 15, 20 years later. He is part of a berserker gang. And if you don't know what a berserker gang is basically kind of like the elite troops of the Vikings. Like, they were very, very, very fearsome.
Well, and they're very violent and, like, very not caring of other people, right? Because,
that's just generally, but no, I'm talking about, like, your regular Viking troops would be, it's like the U.S. Army versus the U.S. Marines.
Mm.
It's like, so you have your regular troops, but your berserkers are the ones making the initial assault, just like they did in the movie. But basically, he gets called back through a soothsayer after raiding this one village to go back to his home to get the throne back. He's reminded of his goal, and there he meets his girlfriend, whatever. She's a Russian, kind of like pre-modern Russian, so not your vodka drinking brunette in Soviet attire, peasant girl who is I think she's a seer or something like that. She's kind of like a minor priestess or something like that. So, and then they end up going to Iceland, which is where the uncle reigns, because he was kicked out by Harold Hardrada, as I mentioned earlier. Big guy. We kind of like Harold Hardrada, depending on who you are. We kind of do. But basically, he gets called back, but he is a slave, and he bides his time for revenge until ultimately. So he does a bunch of acts as a slave. He finds a sword that can only be unsheathed. There's the word, unsheathed at night or in the presence of a certain volcano. And then he goes around doing different acts. And then finally, we get to kind of the climax of the movie where he starts his revenge plot. In between there's a little bit of a game, and this is where the orgy thing happens, where he basically gets the Russian chick, where he and the Russian chick have sex, and end up having.
There was some nudity too. It wasn't like crazy out of hand. Like, I don't think we ever saw a straight tit, but we saw some ass.
We did.
So that was I wouldn't say that was jarring, but that was definitely interesting.
Yeah.
But not like they didn't. I don't think they took it too far.
No, they
like
didn't.
They're essentially having pillow talk. So like I don't know how you're supposed to like really cover that up with the camera without making it really cheesy or stupid. Yeah. So.
But anyway, so he finally gets on the warpath. He confronts his mother, who ended up actually marrying the uncle because of...
And kissed her son on the mouth. What the heck? Okay, I'm done. Continue.
that happened. But basically, it's revealed that she did not like his father and that he was the result of a rape.
Yep.
Is that his birth? That's his...
Essentially.
And so basically, he figures out that the entire life that he has led has basically been a lie, but instead of breaking down like a normal character, he just only gets more enraged and and then the next night he goes on his big.
That was the biggest plot twist, right? Was the mother being basically the whole brains behind his father's death, and her husband's death at that point, and so she just marries the uncle because he's like. She said something along the lines of like, "Oh, he's a better ruler. He's something like that, right? Better lover." She was in it for like selfish reasons. So like, his whole reason for seeking revenge was kind of just like, well, this has been derailed now because I'm doing this for revenge on my mother's sadness, and his sadness obviously of his father's death. But then he found out it was just she planned it, and it was just kind of enraging.
It instead of it breaking him down, it just enraged him more to include the mother in his revenge plan too.
Yep.
Which in like the next couple of nights, like obviously there should be spoiler alerts on this. Like, I don't know if
Yeah,
you know that.
I mean, people I think know at this point
Yeah.
that unless I say we're not going to have spoilers, we're going to spoil it.
Okay.
So
basically,
people should be aware
basically
of
what
that.
ends up happening is that within the next couple of nights, he's like, "Fine, I'm going to act my revenge plan," and so he, I forget how he does it, but he breaks out. Oh no. After that he kills the older brother
Of
the
the
older,
uncle.
of the uncle. No, the older son.
The older son of
and
rips
rips his heart out. And this is another interesting thing about Norse mythology is because if you have your heart ripped out, you cannot go to Valhalla or anything like that. That's and they make a big deal about this in the movie right after.
I was gonna say the interesting parts of this movie was that you learned Norse lore without knowing you learned Norse lore, right?
Yes.
That was one of the examples of like I had no idea that was a thing, but I gathered that and figured that out myself just simply because of how the characters were acting. And like it didn't confuse me at all. So that was a strong point of the movie.
Yeah, that was very well done how they handled the whole mythology. But basically he ends up fighting a bunch of soldiers, but he ends up getting defeated. And this is kind of where he becomes, I will say, a little bit of a, like you pointed this out, he kind of becomes like Jesus.
Yeah, so there's a lot of like Jesus parallels, like and within the shots, within like character reactions. Obviously, I don't think the movie's trying to say he is Jesus or the Jesus of that time. I just think that it was an interesting like an interesting take. And by the end of the movie, you don't even know if you want him to win because he's had his controversies. Like the team he was with at the beginning was like, you know, burning children, and he was complicit in that. And so you're kind of just like, okay, so this guy has a couple screws loose, or is, you know, has something wrong. But in the end, you are kind of rooting for him to win. And spoiler alert, it does, I guess. They both kill each other. He cuts off his uncle's head, and the uncle stabs him straight in the heart. So they both go to Valhalla, I guess, in the end.
Kind of.
Interesting, but the Jesus, I'll start with that just so people aren't confused of like, where are you getting that? So at the beginning of the movie, he willingly put himself into slavery. He willingly got onto the boat and acted like a normal person. Again, this is just me from maybe overanalyzing films now because that's just part of what I'm learning. But from what I saw, he willingly gave himself into slavery. He willingly became a slave to help.
Not really to help.
It was more to help himself, and that's where this theory is kind of derailed. But if you look in the actions, one of the shots of our main character was him being abused. He had blood dripping from him. He was like hanging in like a very like crucified-esque position.
It wasn't a true crucifix.
No, but it was like the bloodiness and then the fact that he was just hanging there was just kind of like that way. And then in the end, he faces death and is raised into heaven / Valhalla in this case. Yeah. So, like, it's not a perfect alignment, and I'm not going to stand by and say, this is exactly what the author meant. I'm just pointing out that there were some very, very similar parallels between certain aspects of that.
Yeah. And so, getting on with the movie. So, basically, after that whole son thing happens, he's hung up in a barn. So this is what Jonah was talking about. He's chained up in a barn. He is beaten, and he is quite bloody. It looks like a scene pulled straight out of
the crucifix.
Not really the crucifix. I'm just thinking of Good Friday.
Yeah,
it looks
it's like a scene that looks very much like that. Yes.
It's a very much scene, but in the end, and this is where you really start to get. This is where you understand kind of where the whole mythology thing, Odin's watching over him, really starts to come in, is because during this time, there's about 10 ravens that come and actually unlock him or somehow peck away at his chains. Mm-hmm. I forget how they do it, but basically that's kind of another sign that Odin is watching over him.
And then his not girlfriend comes and saves him.
Not girlfriend. And then they run away, and then they get on a ship, or a small sailing ship, to go to England to kind of restart. And that's when he somehow has a vision that his not girlfriend is pregnant.
Yep.
Which
with
you
twins.
were
With twins.
with twins, which you were very confused about at first.
Well, yeah,
The way he worded it wasn't great.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, but that's also like the times. I don't expect them to be speaking like we are right now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So, but then he ends up jumping off the boat. He goes back into the village. He goes back into the village where he was kind of a captive, where his uncle rules, to go fight his uncle. He ends up trying to find his uncle. He ends up killing his mother and his younger half brother because they both attack him.
And he was just like, yeah, okay, bye.
Well, that's the thing. It was very much self-defense killing, and he's injured. He's injured by both of them. Both of them come out of him, injure him.
Mother didn't try to kiss him this time. So
yeah, mother tried to kill him, and the kid basically just jumped on his back and stabbed him like 23 times at Julius Caesar there.
Yep, that kid was going at it, man.
And then he and his uncle have
a duel
at the
because he killed the wife and kid. The king, the cousin, or the uncle challenges him to a duel, and so they duel on top of the
volcano.
Hell, Hel.
Hel. That's
the gateway to hell. I think is what they call it.
Yeah, that's another Norse mythology thing.
Yep.
And so he and the uncle end up both dying there, and then that's the end of the movie.
Well, the last scene is him seeing his Valkyrie coming to bring him to Valhalla.
Yes.
So, yeah. And did you ever explain how he got to have sex with his not girlfriend in the first place?
Oh no!
So like
I kind of touched on it.
He was part of a game where you like have to wrestle and then you have to hit the ball onto the pole. It was just a sports game, right? And he was forced to compete because he was so strong. And he ended up saving the king's son, which was his half brother.
His half brother.
From getting absolutely just beheaded by the opposite team.
Granted, the kid was stupid and running out into the field, but because of his fanatical defense, and he basically, this is one of the parts that I don't think you liked that well, especially with the gore, because basically what he does is the guy who chucked the kid down and basically almost killed him kind of laughs at it, and he basically headbutts him like 10 times.
Yeah, so
and breaks open his skull.
Well,
and assumedly kills him.
Yeah, well, my thing was like he's using his forehead to hit the other guy's nose, right? And that's just like it's not that I didn't think it was realistic. It was just more like, ooh, that's gross, and I don't want to watch that kind of thing. And the sound effects were just like not doing it for me. My only thing about that scene that I was kind of like, okay, that's a little strange. Besides the headbutting, was the fact that this kid was just pushed. And he came up, like, nose bleeding, like, his whole face was covered in blood. And it's like, you were literally just shoved down on the grass. I don't think you should have sustained that bad of injuries because the other guy didn't get to touch you that much.
Yeah.
That was the one thing I was kind of like, okay, I don't know if he would be that dirty and bloody after just being shoved by a very strong man.
Yeah.
The other guy didn't even have a chance to like behead him or like mash him that much. He was just shoved.
Yeah.
So that was the one thing I was kind of like, okay. But other than that, I thought the movie definitely plays on the realism of how a battle would have been back then.
Yeah.
And I was toying with the fact of whether I liked it or not. And I've came to the conclusion that I did, and it was very, I hate to say good violence, but like it was well done to not sugarcoat it, essentially.
Yeah, because like I kind of talked to you about this too. You know, if you come into this movie with an expectation of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, you will be surprised.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because here's the thing. You're like, but it's Assassin's Creed. I'm like, but it's Assassin's Creed. I mean, look, it's like it's pixelated blood, and then you kind of just you slash and grab, you maybe do a beheading once or twice, and then it's just kind of like, ooh, he falls down and he's dead.
Yep.
Like, no, this was like full on actual, you know, how they would have done it back then, violence. You know, obviously they have to fake it because they don't want to kill anybody.
Right.
But
yeah,
it was as realistic as possible, and that's one of the things I really appreciated about it, because if you look at I will say a lot of Viking literature is toned down just because people don't want people to see that side of just the absolute violence that it is. And kind of going on my own personal little rant here, you look at the people who really, I will say, glorify the Vikings today. If you've seen that on Instagram or whatever, the guys who do kind of like this Norse workout, they're doing it. I'm not saying that it's bad to do these workouts. I'm not saying that it's bad that they like the Norse kind of thing. I'm just saying that know who you are embodying. Like, yes, they were a very fit people, and yes, they were a very disciplined people in that sense, but they were also very undisciplined in other parts. They were very, very cut off from the world. They did not... It was a very Darwinist way of looking at the world to them, even though Charles Darwin wouldn't be born for like another 1,000 years. But generally in that sense, the movie did portray it very accurately. One of the things I did forget to mention, but I thought was amazing about this movie was the visions, and specifically the visions showing a tree line. So if you know anything about Norse mythology or don't know anything about Norse mythology, they basically believe that there are 9 realms.
Yep.
So there's the 9 realms, and they are upheld by this thing called Yggdrasil, which is Yggdrasil. It's basically the tree of life. It's basically equates to the tree of life. It's what upholds everything. Like if Greek mythology is your thing, you could just think it's basically Atlas.
Yeah.
And basically, and one of the really cool things that the movie does is that a few times when the main character has a vision of his family line, first of who he kind of is, ascending to king, or supposedly king, at that right before he went into the church and had the little wolf dance with his dad and did all that stuff. That was right before his father got killed and the revenge journey starts. But also at the end when his not girlfriend gets pregnant with his kids and he sees them both on basically this family tree line, and basically they're referencing a smaller version of Yggdrasil, Yggdrasil? I don't know. I think it's Yggdrasil. But basically, it's just a smaller representation of that as a way of seeing how life goes through and how kind of the family tree works. And I really appreciated that just because it's calling back to something. It's obviously something that they would have kind of looked into in those days.
But yeah. The interesting part, I don't know if you mentioned this, but it was prophesied that he would either our main character would either choose to go finish his revenge story or to stay with his not girlfriend and kids during their birth, and eventually he chose revenge, and he was killed, so he never obviously was able to get back to his wife and kids. I guess they're married.
Not really.
Not really,
I mean,
but yes.
Kind of.
That's why we're calling it his not girlfriend, just because it's funny.
I mean, there was no official ceremony. I mean, basically, and that was the thing. Like after the game where he helps save the kid and basically bashes the other dude's skull, and at this time not his older brother, the older son says, "You may take this person as your wife," and it worked a little bit differently back then. They didn't have a marriage for it. They just said, "Okay, now you two just get a bang."
Essentially, he gained the right to frick her because he saved the son, and then essentially meant that they were a thing.
Yes.
Essentially.
Yes. So that's where that whole thing came from. If you didn't realize that, they obviously liked each other. They kind of liked each other. I don't even know. It was kind of more.
Well, the way the camera angles were set up on that boat, the shots of her comforting that other girl who was crying, and the way he was looking over at them, it wasn't like he was looking at her sexually. It was kind of more of like okay, our paths are going to intertwine kind of a camera angles that displayed that, and by the time he reaches and has worked a little bit in the little village in Iceland, you kind of realize that okay, they're gonna probably have a child or something. Because a lot of what he says is to protect her or to see her or to, there were also some points where he was planning out his attack
revenge.
and his revenge. But yeah, so there was a lot. It's very gruesome. It's very like violent, but I think that worked to the movie's advantage. And speaking of a little bit gruesome and violence working to an advantage of a movie, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. That's a transition, boys. So yeah, I will give my first impressions on this one first because I think I've had this rant to like 5 people, and it's a good rant. It's not bad. Multiverse of Madness was not what I expected at all. As a movie, as a like plot of the movie, it was okay. There was flaws, and there's obviously going to be, because you're working with a multiverse and you're working with endless possibilities. That people are gonna have criticisms of that. It's just like time travel. Like people have a problem with Endgame because time travel is just so wacky and wanky that it's just people are gonna have differing opinions on it. But the reason that I think Multiverse of Madness is a top tier and a good movie is because of the different approach it took. I'm gonna have to look up the director because I want to give him credit. He did Spider-Man.
Sam Raimi.
Thank you, Sam Raimi. He did the Spider-Man movies, and he's kind of known for his more horror.
Yeah, he does. He's a little bit more of a horror director, and he kind of takes that. He does it. I will say he actually does it decently well. Where he kind of takes that whole, where he takes a mainstream movie and makes it a little bit kind of scary.
Yeah, and this movie was a little bit more horror thriller than it was Marvel, and I was there for it. Obviously, we saw it in theaters, and there were times when the whole crowd was just kind of like, oh, like kind of just like shocked that Disney allowed that violent of a death to happen. I'll get into specific moments on that later, but I think this is a good change for Marvel. If you look at Marvel's past movies to like the first Avengers movie that came in 2012. There was a lot of fighting, but not a lot of like, you didn't see a lot of death, right? You didn't see a lot of blood. You didn't see a lot of any of that.
It was cartoon violence.
Yes, and I think that at that point their audience was 12 to 14-year-old, or 12 to like younger audience is my point. They were trying to appeal and get a younger audience into this, as well as parents. It was something that both parents and
kids
could watch together, and it was great. But now I think Marvel has gotten to the point where they're growing up with their audience, and that is a good thing. The Marvel is finally saying, okay, so most of the people that were in 2012 who were, say, 12 years old are now 20 and 21 years old, right? And so they're like, okay, they don't the audience who has been watching this throughout their whole life, essentially, is not looking for another Avengers, the first movie. That was good for its time, and it was a great approach, but now we got to change that approach to our audience who is now grown up a little bit more.
Yes.
Because if you are 12 now, chances are you would have to start at the first movie in order to get to the Multiverse of Madness, and you have 25, 24 movies to get through, and not including the TV series.
I will say it is kind of a social thing too, where people are like, you do have to watch in order because it is a very linear story.
I mean, the movies stand up by themselves, obviously, but like you get more out of them if you watch them in order, right?
Yes.
And most people are going to advocate to watch them in order, and most people are going to want to.
And those people who are going to do that are the 21 to 22 year olds and 23 to 24 year olds are going to say that to the younger generation. We're going to be like, watch these in order, you will appreciate us for it, even though kind of like new movies are kind of the thing. But go on.
So yeah, Multiverse of Madness is an excellent movie because I think it finally shows change that Marvel is getting into, and we're not even gonna talk about all this like LGBTQ stuff surrounding Disney. We're here just strictly just talk about Marvel.
Yeah.
And the politics aside of it, it's wow, I'm stuttering now. Politics aside, the Multiverse of Madness, the Doctor Strange movie was an excellent movie. Just simply because of the mood swings and how it treated its audience maturely, I think. So let's what were your? I'll let you kind of give your thoughts, Ross.
I really enjoyed it too. I too really enjoyed the fact that it was for a bit more of a mature audience. I appreciated a lot of the things. Although there is one thing that I kind of felt was a little bit off, and that was kind of the theme of this movie. Like, there were a few possible ones that you could look for, but I think the one that the movie really tried and wanted to answer between Wanda and Doctor Strange is the "Are you happy?"
Yeah, that was a particularly interesting question that Wanda brought up, because obviously she's asking in the context of, are you happy essentially with your love life? Because in like every universe ever, every timeline, I don't think Doctor Strange ever gets the girl. And if you watched What If, there's a reason behind that. Is because like essentially the way Marvel explains it is, within all timelines there is a certain event, a certain happening, a certain something that is constant, and that is one of those. So if that is ever broken, the whole universe itself would collapse. And that's how we got evil Doctor Strange in What If, who he turned into all these animals. He was like Dark Doctor Strange. I don't know his official name, but that's how we got that, right? Yeah. So that you do kind of need to watch certain series before this. WandaVision you can skip, Ross. I know you didn't watch that, and you still understood this movie. Yes. But you do get a little bit more. Essentially what you missed from WandaVision is that she took over a whole town with her dark magic because she was so upset over the loss of Vision. Yeah. Like that's all you missed. And if you know that's what the show's about, you're able to move on. Yes. But that series does set up a few things with Vision that is interesting. So you should watch WandaVision eventually.
I will.
Because Vision, I think, is going to come up again in the future. But it also played off of Loki a little bit, the series. Yep. Because essentially, Loki is the reason... It's been a while since I've seen Loki. But Loki is the reason that there's a multiverse in the first place or something, or the timeline split. There's some, like, timeline mess. Like... Right? So, like, it's so hard to keep track of what's going on and everything. So, Loki, like, the series like Loki and WandaVision, actually, I think, are better now that Multiverse of Madness is out, because it gives more context to these series. Yeah, so I would argue that you should go see both of those before you watch Multiverse of Madness, but it's not absolutely necessary. What I just told you, essentially, what you need to know from WandaVision in order for Multiverse of Madness to make sense. Yeah. So yeah, details and like plot of this movie. Essentially, Doctor Strange runs into this girl called America, which I think I turned to you in the middle of the movie. It's like, why the heck did they decide to call her America? Because, like, they had lines like, America holds the... there was one line, she's like, America holds the power to end this, or something. I was like, that's just sounds really strangely familiar. Yeah. Like, that's a little too on the nose. And I don't think they were trying to do, like, they weren't trying to say...
Social implications.
Social implication with it, but it just sounded like it was just a weird name for a character. Maybe that's a real name. I don't know. I'm sorry, but that was just like, that really threw me off.
That could have been a comic thing too.
I think that might have been a comic thing. But essentially, she runs into America, and America essentially has a power to time travel through different universes.
She doesn't time travel.
Not time travel. You're right.
She opens portals to different multiverses, and then and kind of like the way it's explained in the movies, that you're alive in the other multiverses because that's like the source of your dreams or whatever. Mm-hmm. And she doesn't dream, so that's where she.
Dude, if that's true, my other if my dream self is like me from a different reality, I don't want to be there. Anyway,
Jonah, I think we know that's not true.
There's maybe two, but my dreams are whack. And, if I started a dream journal, man, some of the movie ideas that some of y'all would get is just creepy. Yeah, anyway.
I don't think we want that.
Continue.
But basically, Doctor Strange at the beginning attends Christine's, his ex-girlfriend's, wedding to another dude. And that was the whole event. That's the whole thing you were talking about with the event that just has to happen in every single universe, is that Doctor Strange and Christine just end up do not.
Their ways just part, inevitably.
Their ways just part, inevitably. And basically, there's this weird tentacle monster that looks like something from D&D. I know I'm not faking fun of you D&D nerds. I love D&D. So basically, this weird tentacle monster, not hentai, is attacking America Chavez because she has the power to go through multiple multiverses without penalty, and that's kind of the huge thing. And so that's when so Doctor Strange and Wong fight it, and that's where they figure out that this thing, instead of not wizardry, but it was runic symbols, which are more associated with witches and Wanda. And so he goes to ask Wanda, and this is kind of where the whole thing starts off. She's in the middle of some apple grove, trying to live out peacefully after the whole events of WandaVision. And he's explaining the problem to her, and then she mentions America's name, which Doctor Strange had told her.
Never mentioned. So essentially what you learn in that case is that Wanda has been studying
It's called the
Dark Hold, which is like essentially dark magic, and the Dark Hold is a powerful force, and it essentially just takes over people's minds and makes them kind of think irrationally, essentially. So Wanda's visions technically aren't Wanda in this movie, but they are. So Wanda is the villain of this whole movie, which is an interesting twist as well.
I will say put villain in quotation marks.
Yeah.
Put villain in quotation marks there.
She's the antagonist.
She is the antagonist.
That's a good way to put it. But
she's not.
She acts as the villain in this.
She acts as the villain, and that's kind of the other thing I had a little bit of a problem was that, I mean, obviously for story purposes it makes perfect sense. But I would have just appreciated a little bit more forcefulness on her part. But obviously you can't do that because that just alienates a whole thing with the fan base. But anyway, so they kind of get into a big fight.
Yeah, Wanda essentially says, "Yes, I've been hunting down America, and I want to use her power to get back to my kids." And,
no, it's not getting back to her kids. It's going to a different dimension where she actually does have kids.
Well, she wants to get back to her kids because in WandaVision, she took over this town and eventually
I thought her kids were just made up too.
They were. Yeah, that's why.
But in the other universes, they're real.
Right. Yeah. So the Darkhold is essentially making her think that she's going to, I'm saying in quotation marks, get back to her kids.
Yeah.
When really they're not her kids, and she's not thinking rationally. Obviously.
Yeah. It's like a whole thing, but so she ends up becoming the Scarlet Witch, her namesake, her actual namesake, and the actual powers that come from this, and basically, as she's explained, is that. As the Scarlet Witch is actually explained, is that she is basically second to none. Like she could if
she's one of the most powerful beings in the MCU. Yeah,
and especially in that Scarlet Witch kind of I will say.
In her Scarlet Witch mode, she is the most powerful.
Yes.
This Wanda up until this point had no idea how to harness the sheer amount of power she has.
She could do it. Like the way I would describe it is, it's kind of similar to Anakin when he turns to the dark side.
Right.
It's kind of similar. I mean, obviously there's a lot of differences, but if you look at Anakin in episodes 1, 2, and 3 compared to him in 4, 5, and 6, he is a lot more powerful in 4, 5, and 6 than he was in 1, 2, and 3. But it's just but that's because he was just enlightened to new ways to use his powers by Emperor Palpatine.
And Wanda was, quote unquote, enlightened. But there are ways that Wanda could become very powerful through non-dark ways. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, they kind of battle at what was it called? The Cramatage, which is where all the wizards are trained, including Doctor Strange. That's where Wong is. And that's where we figure out that she can basically negate a lot of the powers of the wizards, like their mirror dimension and seeing everything through there, so through reflections in water or whatever.
Yep. So yeah, she ends up getting trapped in the mirror dimension, but she breaks free. And America essentially I need to stop saying essentially, but every time she gets scared, she opens portals to a different world, to a different universe timeline, and so she gets scared obviously when Wanda's attacking her, and it's just the Ancient One or Wong and Doctor Strange, and Doctor Strange and America get sucked into one of their portals.
Wong.
They have this cool moment with like the spinning camera that's very famous for the director. Where like there's cool shout outs, like one of them's a comic looking one of them's like paint.
Yeah,
there's some
really
like
awesome.
really funny moments, but like the amount of jokes that were in this movie is like there was like none compared to like normal Marvel movies. Like in the peril of a fight in the first Avengers movie, they're like cracking jokes left and right. Like they'll make fun of Hulk, then they'll make fun of Iron Man. But in this movie, the jokes are very minimal.
Yeah.
One of the best payoff joke was the hot dog guy punching himself, and then if you stayed at the end of the credits, he just looks straight at the camera and he's like, "It's over." Like that was the best probably payoff bit of the whole movie. But there were not very many jokes, which is also.
But it was a nice tone change. Like it was a very nice serious movie. Like I'd kind of describe it as like like it's kind of the same thing like tonal wise. I'd say it's like the same thing like with one of the Captain America movies. Which one is kind of like Civil War? I'd say where you have that serious tonal shift. Yeah. Even though Civil War had a lot of jokes, like there's still that
very light colored, right? Like the hue of the movie was very like happy.
Like this one was a lot darker, but anyway,
absolutely.
Where were we? So yeah, Doctor Strange and America get stuck in an alternate dimension, and they're trying to weave their way around. And this is where they come to find this, and then they try, of course, to find the other Doctor Strange. And this is where they're controlled by the Illuminati.
I could not take that seriously. He's just like, Doctor Strange is like, "Who are you guys?" And he's like, "We are the Illuminati." And I'm like, I'm sorry, what?
Excuse me? But yeah.
I started laughing in the theater. Like, I felt bad. People around me were annoyed, but I like bursted out laughing. I was like, "Is that a joke? Are you serious?" Yeah. And if essentially, Ultron. There's a bunch of Ultron bots just walking around. It's like they're the bodyguards, and it's hilarious.
Yeah, but anyway, so it turns out that Doctor Strange, not the Scarlet Witch, is the biggest threat to the multiverse because I forget why. Oh no, because in their world, Doctor Strange got the Darkhold, and he used it to defeat Thanos. But then he ended up becoming too powerful.
But then he became corrupt himself, right?
He became corrupt himself, but somehow he held it back and allowed this Norse dude who looked like Ace from Rainbow Six. Did he not look like Ace?
He absolutely did.
He did look like. So I forget his name. It was like Black Lightning or something. He wasn't black, but I forget what his name was. I forget what his name was. But he had a little fork out. He had like a little two-pronged fork out of his head, and when he spoke, it basically just like destroyed everything, which is awesome. But
so yeah, there was this cool fan moment where Strange is bought before the members of the Illuminati, like the heads, and so like first it's revealed that that speaking guy is first revealed. No, the first guy is his partner who brought him in the first Doctor Strange movie. What was his name? Mordo. So you first learn that Mordo is like head of one of the heads of the Illuminati.
So it's Mordo.
Then it turns to that guy who can't talk. I forget, or if he does talk, he like
destroys everyone.
And then there's this cool moment where a shield is thrown and it's showing Captain Carter. If you saw the What If series, it was what if Captain Carter or Peggy Carter was Captain America. So there was a nod to that. She was on the council. Then there was the guy from Fantastic Four, which was casted as the guy who plays Jim on The Office. John Krasinski. And that was a cool moment. I was just like, I was so excited for that moment. That was like my favorite moment from the movie. That and the next character, Professor X, from the X-Men movie showed up, and he was in his wheelchair, and he was like, "Yep, I'm here too." He's essentially the boss.
He was awesome. I really appreciate that. They basically put him in a Ferrari of a wheelchair.
Yeah, his wheelchair was like whack, man. So yeah, that whole council was like a nod to so many things, and I appreciated that a lot.
But anyway, so moving on with the story. So before the Illuminati, Doctor Strange and America were kept in these two very weird. They're basically kept in confinement areas of very strong plexiglass. I forget what it was called, but it turns out that Christine was working with the Illuminati to research multiverses and stuff like that. And long term short, we figure out that Wanda, aka the Scarlet Witch, can do this thing called dream walking.
Yeah.
And dream walking is this really interesting thing where she can basically astral project herself
Into an alternate version of herself. Yep.
And then just basically wreak havoc anywhere. And then it will cause what's called an incursion, which basically is where two multiverses collide and destroy everything. Like, yeah, and that was a really cool thing to see, but she ends up doing that, defeats the Illuminati besides Mordo, which is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Because Mordo just
I think that's that was like one of the moments that the theater just went, oh. Yeah, was when the guy, Wanda essentially shut the mouth of the guy who screams to kill her. And, like, he screams because he freaks out because he has no mouth. And his brain in the back of his head just explodes.
It literally just turned to mush.
Yeah, and it was, like, gooing all... Like, it was gooing on the inside. You could see it. Like, it didn't break through the skull, but you could see, like, the gooiness of when he fell down. And the whole theater just went, ooh. Yeah. The whole theater went, ooh, when Doctor Strange took out the eye to the monster.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the movie, that is the moment where you're like, ah, crap, this is a way different tone of a movie than Marvel has been used to. Like, it was so peculiar. They showed, like, burning bodies when Wanda was, like, invading the Doctor Strange's place.
The Carmitage.
Yeah. So, like, this, again, I keep coming back to it. This movie was such a tonal change. Anyway, continue with your summary, because you're doing a good job.
And while they're there, Doctor Strange is trying to find this book called the Book of Ashanti, which is basically, like, the antithesis to the Darkhold.
Yep.
And so, basically, he's basically saying, I can use that to defeat the Scarlet Witch and return everything back to normal, and it's not going to be a problem, and they basically refuse to help him. Basically, everyone on the council, except for Professor X refuses to help him because they're like, you're too dangerous. And Professor X, because, you know, he reads minds, he's like, no, he good. He
Gucci, man.
He Gucci. But anyway, long story. Anyway, so Wanda ends up coming, she kills the 4 on the Illuminati, the 5, not besides Mordo, and America and the Christine of this universe end up escaping under a tunnel and actually getting to the Book of Ashanti where it is actually destroyed. So we have so at this point, you're looking at it and you're like, oh, this is not good.
Yeah, so, yeah. Yep. And the Darkhold also has a weird thing where it exists in multiple universes, but at the end of the movie, somehow Wanda destroys all of them.
I think she does it by dreamwalking.
I don't know how she does it and how that works, but that was the one thing that I was kind of confused on. But she essentially destroys the Darkhold, the book, and the writing and stuff in every universe.
Yeah.
Which opens a wormhole to me as, like, why didn't a Wanda from a different universe do this earlier?
Yeah.
You know, like, you feel like maybe this was the first timeline that happened, but you feel like there should have been, if there's infinite timelines, then, like, that should have happened before. Anyway, that's when, like, this gets really shaky and you just don't think about it too much because you're going to ruin it. Yeah. So, sorry for making you think about it too much.
So then Doctor Strange and Christine and America are separated, with Doctor Strange and Christine going into one of the worlds that was in What If, I believe?
Yes.
Yes. So they go into one of the worlds of What If where Doctor Strange... Who's calling you?
I don't know why she's so avid on calling me right now. Continue.
So she's... So she basically goes to fight both of them. America is captured, and Doctor Strange and Christine have to figure out a way to stop them. And Doctor Strange does this by basically inhabiting one of his dead bodies in regular Earth, whatever version it is that he's from. Because in the beginning of the movie, we forgot to mention this, I'm sorry, that basically the old Doctor Strange that was trying to help America in the beginning and ended up betraying her, ended up dying, and he is now dead in our Doctor Strange's world. So he and Christine end up setting up a ritual from the Darkhold, preceded by one of the best fights in the movie, where they basically just fling notes at each other And I think Doctor Strange is like Beethoven's 7th Symphony, which was awesome.
That fight scene in and of itself was the most different thing I've ever seen.
That
like,
was so
it was
cool.
really cool. And it was very creative, and I appreciated it a lot.
Yeah, so Doctor Strange ends up possessing his dead body that was in the regular world, and because you're not allowed to do that, according to for some odd reason.
Well, he's also possessing a dead body, which is kind of a no-no.
Yeah.
When he was dreamwalking.
So as I said, he got to control the Darkhold. He possessed his own body, and Christine has to defend him like 3 or so, dead spirits, and then as dead Doctor Strange, she ends up fighting Wanda and sort of freeing. Oh, we forgot to talk about the Wong and Vision and WandaVision subplot, where they go and find
Yeah, eventually, well, that subplot it wraps up pretty nicely. Essentially what it is Wanda figures out I could rule this world if I want to.
So basically, like the way it happens is that the Darkhold, the book, is destroyed by one of
Wong's helpers.
One of Wong's helpers. And so then Wanda threatens to basically like torture every single still alive warlock or whatever. Witchcraft? I don't know.
Yeah. She was being evil.
She was being evil. So and so then Wong takes her to the place where the Darkhold was written and copied down from, which looked like a tomb, but as you figure out, it is a throne.
It's a throne for Wanda.
It's a throne for Wanda, where she can rule the universe / the multiverse from.
Yep.
And so anyway, as we're getting to the main fight, so Wong and Doctor Strange fight off against Wanda, where it finally comes to realize that even though, how did that go again? I forget.
A cool moment that while you try to like gather your thoughts there, one cool moment was a nod to What If, Zombie Strange, was when Strange took over Dead Strange's body. That was kind of just a nod to What If, which was really cool. I
remember what happened now.
Yeah.
So basically they fight against like 4 demons plus Wanda, and at the end, America is freed, and she opens a portal to where Wanda can find her kids in a different multiverse.
Wanda can find herself and her kids.
Wanda can find herself.
The person she took over earlier in the movie. The Wanda she took over earlier.
The Wanda in the Illuminati world, we'll call it.
Yeah.
And basically through that interaction, she figures out that she's not seen as their mother because she's not technically their mother from that universe.
Yep.
And that's where she ends up having this whole breakdown, and it's like, and that's where the Darkhold finally loses its grip on her, and the movie ends.
She does the right thing by destroying the tomb, and which ends up destroying all the Darkholds. Apparently,
she somehow does
Strange. Anyway, that we're gonna brush over that part because that's the one part that has me just like a little bit like that's a loose end that I kind of wanted somehow tied up, or if she did, like maybe she only destroyed some of them, not all of them.
Mm-hmm.
That was just a loose end that I was like, okay, that's pushing the limit for me, but otherwise a very good movie.
But then the movie ends on probably what I was alluding back to with the Are You Happy? Like, throughout this movie, it was kind of alluded to, especially at the end of the beginning, of the Are You Happy? Like, that was the whole thing of Wanda's, is that she was not happy in the current universe because she did not have kids.
She didn't have her kids. And essentially, Wanda was trying to trick Strange into thinking, are you happy because you don't have the girl?
You don't have Christine. And one of the nice things at the end of the movie, my boy Wong gets asked the same question by Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange goes and asks him, are you happy? And Wong says, I'm never really sure, or something like that, but he basically says, like, I understand that now there are multiple me's out there, and, they're having their own happiness, and I'm happy with what I am given here. Which I think should have been a little bit more pronounced in the movie, especially to people today. People today are not happy with who they are. Like, obviously, like, there's some of it for self-improvement, and that's okay, but there's a lot of people who just aren't happy with where they are, or who they are, or whatever. And the nice thing about that is that theme throughout the movie is it basically said, guys, you can still be happy with who you are. It doesn't
And
it
what
does-
you have.
and what you have. It
Yep.
doesn't take having everything to be happy. It basically takes making the most of what you're given. And it's kind of cliche at this point, but I really appreciate how they did touch on it. I wish they would have touched on it a little bit
That
more.
messaging was I'm not gonna say it's subtle because it was quite blatant.
It was quite blatant.
Simply because of Wanda's reason for asking Strange if he was happy was to kind of make him kind of double think it and kind of doubt himself and kind of like get him on her side.
Yeah.
But like it did bring forth that theme that you're talking about, and I think that's a good message for today's world.
Yeah, it was just really nice to hear and not only is it a reinforcement to Doctor Strange within the movie to basically say, you know what, I can be okay with letting Christine go. It's not a problem with me. Like, life happens. We have to move on. At that point is basically what they were saying, and Doctor Strange is able to kind of finally move past that and just go and get past that, which was really nice. But
yeah, so I think this movie was very strong. I appreciated it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Don't bring your kids to go see it.
Yeah.
It pushed the PG-13 limit.
Yeah,
which I think was a good thing.
It was, yeah.
Which was it's strange for me to say now, but I am 100% on board if this is kind of the style that not I don't want every Marvel to be a horror trope from now on, but I think it's strong that they're starting to mature more with the audience.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, I don't want every Marvel movie to be as serious as this one too. I want my lighthearted, fun Marvel movies. I want, I still want, good comedies. Like, I will say, like, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Excellent example of it. It was a very fun movie. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it was a very fun movie to see. Like, I would enjoy watching it. Like Doctor Strange and Multiverse and Madness, I liked. Yeah, Multiverse. Yeah, I can't speak today. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness was really fun to see as well, but it was also kind of to that point where I'm like, yeah, you know what? I don't know if I'd watch this right away again, just because it sticks in your mind.
Yeah, there was a lot of cool moments.
Yeah. Yeah. So altogether, I'd give this movie 8.5.
Yeah, I'm ranking this high on my movie list, not necessarily for plot, but because of the reasons I've mentioned ad nauseum. So I think that's gonna do it. We're hitting up on an hour here. So I think we're gonna.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I know.
We talked for a long time.
Well, we had two big movies that
That's
were both
fair.
like very recent in our minds to talk about. So
Next up would be what? Thor: Love and Thunder.
Thor: Love and Thunder, I think, is the next Marvel thing. I
Yeah.
haven't gotten around to finishing Moon Knight, but
I need to watch Moon Knight as well.
At some point, I do actually want to like finish watching that, and I'm also watching Agents of Shield and like all the stuff that was on Netflix at one point, all the Marvel content there. So there'll probably be some podcasting. I'll at least mention on this podcast, I'm sure, at some point. But thank you guys for watching. I guess watch. But thank you for listening to this episode of Lifecast.
You know what we still need to do? We still need to do the podcast about Warfare and Star Wars.
Yes, Star Wars coming soon. Well, probably tie really well to when we watch the Obi-Wan Kenobi series that comes
Yes.
out. So we'll probably do a podcast during the summer at some point on that.
That one actually might include visuals made by yours truly.
Yeah, Ross is pumped for that, and I'm gonna make him do visuals for that because
he's not going to make me. I want to.
Yeah,
I'm going to clarify that immediately.
I would encourage you to anyway because it's a difficult topic, warfare. But Ross is very versed in warfare strategy, so it's like I'll let you go, Rain, on that one.
Yeah.
So that'll be coming soon. But thank you guys for listening to this episode.
You guys are awesome, like all 9 of you.
I was gonna say 2, but all 2 of you that listen.
All 2 of you. I hope one of them's Robert.
Robert.
I love you, Robert. Hey, we found a bunch of your Nerf stuff.
Yeah, your Nerf stuff's still in our room, so expect an email or a mail package from me soon.
Or we could just send them back with clay.
We should just be annoying and just send him. One of our friends came down and visited, for context for people who don't know, and he brought Nerf guns, and he lost a bunch of Nerf bullets, as you do when you like shoot Nerf guns at people.
Oh, mostly at Jonah.
Mostly at Jonah, but mostly at me, yeah. But we should be annoying and just send him like huge packages with just one of those Nerf bullets in it. He just like once a week is receiving these big packages with one Nerf bullets in it. Anyway, Robert, if you're listening, you didn't hear that. Thank you guys for listening to this episode, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Oh, no problem. I can't wait to listen to it.
No, so we're in 3 viewers this time.
Yeah!
That's great. Yeah.
I like to hear myself talk sometimes.
Hey, it's not bad. It's just don't be narcissistic about it. But when you have to edit your own content, it just happens that way. You grow to know your own voice, and it's like I'm not uncomfortable with my voice anymore. So like there's empoweringness to it, but
especially when you hit your little voice cracks.
Oh, they're great. We'll see you guys in the next episode. When life gives you lemons, enter a multiverse. No, enter a multiverse. Enter a multiverse.